Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. I am your exhausted writer, Leani Lopez, and if you're joining us for the first time, hi, welcome. Happy to have you here. For this week's topic, I actually wanted to talk about this for a while. As most of you know, or at least those who have listened to a couple of episodes before, I have done ghostwriting for the last 4 years, and not much is known about ghostwriting. I certainly didn't know about it really until I got a job doing it, but I've had such an amazing experience, so I wanted to explain a little bit more about what ghostwriting is, the pros and cons of it, and just give some more details about what ghostwriting entails, because I've had to explain it so many times over the years, and I've also gotten the same reactions from people, which we'll go more into because it's very important to talk about. But we will start off with the basics, which is, what is ghostwriting? Ghostwriting is when you are hired to write a story for someone. This could be for another writer who, for whatever reason, can't write the story themselves. This can be for someone who would like to write an autobiography or memoir, but doesn't feel comfortable doing it or doesn't consider themselves a writer. There can be numerous reasons why somebody hires a ghostwriter. Another reason that comes to mind is that they would like the story written in a language that you speak and they don't, at least not fluently. But again, what it means is writing a story for someone else to put their name on. The way that works payment-wise is most ghostwriters just get a lump sum, and then the author gets royalties. Sometimes ghostwriters can be offered royalties. It really is dependent on the client and the project and the situation. A lot of times, the person who is hiring you will be the one to supply the ideas, or they may supply an outline. When I was doing ghostwriting, my client and I would work together to create an outline, and then I would write the story based on the outline we agreed upon. So it can vary from project to project, but that is what I had experience doing. So a lot of times, you're writing this story for someone, but it's not your idea and it's not your characters, essentially. I've been asked many times how I got involved and how I learned what ghostwriting was. And it was actually pretty simple. I had just decided I was going to leave my full-time job to write for a living. So I was going through and looking for a lot of freelance writing jobs. And I signed up for a couple newsletters. And one of them came through that said romance writers wanted. And I was like, cool, I've written smutty fan fiction for my entire life. I can write a romance novel. And so I answered an ad for a ghostwriting company that had just started offering romance novels. I think they had been mostly nonfiction up until that point, and then they had just added a fiction department, so they were hiring. It was very exciting. I got the job, and after working with them for a time, I realized that it was very, very demanding. They had a very strict deadline. They had a all-out formula to romance novels, which in general, romance novels have a formula. But I'm talking about breaking down, like, you spend this many words on plot point 1, or this many words on the hook, and then you move on to this. So it was very analytical. It was very, very, how can I put this? Very formulaic, essentially. And the thing that also kind of frustrated me is that you wouldn't get paid for the project until it was done and sent off. So if something happened and you wrote most of the book but had to bow out towards the end, it didn't matter that you wrote the whole book, you just wouldn't get paid for it. So I didn't stay there for very long. I think I worked there for 3 to 4 months. It was all digital, but it was very demanding, and there was just, you couldn't pick your clients. You kind of just had to work with whoever was assigned to you. And sometimes was great. I remember I had this one client that we really gelled with, and the book came out great, and it was all on time, and it was fantastic. And then I had another one who would sort of blow up with comments when I posted an updated version of the document. So it really didn't give you enough space to go back and flesh things out or like explain to the client that that's how you worked. At least that's how I worked. As I mentioned in the episode about editing, I typically work by putting the scene down kind of bare bones, and then later I go back and flesh it out. And working with this company just did not give you room to do that, or at least explain to the client that that's what you did. And I remember one instance where I was almost done with the book. I literally had like 2,000 more words to do, but it was like really late at night, and that was like the deadline day. So me being me and thinking I was covering my bases, I posted and I was like, hey, the first thing I said was, this is not done yet. I still have about 2,000 more words to go. And I am looking at the final scenes and fleshing them out. But I know it is time to share, so I am sharing it now, and then tomorrow I will have the rest of it. And the client flipped out. She called my boss and basically was bitching about it and said, I paid for this many words and she didn't deliver that many words. And then I got chewed out, and the boss was like, yeah, we had to give her this certain thing for free. It was like a book description or something like that. So don't do that again. And I just sat there like, did nobody read? I said it's not done yet. So that kind of convinced me to be done. I also had 2 projects going at once and asked for more time, and they just would not allow me to take more time. I was having a lot of mental health issues, so unfortunately I did not leave on good terms with them. And I also did not get paid for the 2 projects that I was doing because I didn't finish them. There was one project I felt really bad about because I was only about halfway done. And I don't want to leave clients hanging. I'm a professional. I never want to bail on a project. I just literally just could not do it. And a couple months later, I got a message through my website, and it was from one of my clients from the ghostwriting company. And it was the one that I didn't get a chance to finish. And she was very sweet, and she said she was sad to hear that I left the company, and she really enjoyed what I had written for her. And this made me so happy because I had been using brackets, which, if you don't know what I mean by that, is when you're writing and you're trying to keep the flow going, but you can't get to a scene right then, or you can't make it work, so you put brackets, do a brief description of what the scene's supposed to be, and then keep going. And she said that when she saw those, she was like really impressed, and she could still see where the story was going, even though those parts weren't finished yet. And so she was very sweet, and she offered me a ghostwriting job directly whenever I was ready. Long story short, out of that crazy mess that happened, I learned so much about ghostwriting. I learned so much about my own process, and I gained a client in the process. So it was a very wonderful learning experience. In terms of working with clients and ghostwriting for other people, one of the things I learned is to set boundaries and limits for yourself. You know yourself best. You know what you're capable of. And you also know what does and does not make you uncomfortable. When I am working with a client, or was working with a client when it came to ghostwriting, I was very upfront with my client about what types of stories or genres I enjoyed and which ones that I just did not have any kind of experience in. So, for example, I was working on an outline for my client, and most of the time we worked together, we wrote romantic comedies, and I was happy with that. I knew that. I knew what she expected, and I love writing comedy and banter and stuff like that. But we were working on an outline that was supposed to be kind of dipping into dark romance, and she didn't have as much experience with dark romance as she did with the other genre, and I kind of had a little bit, but not much. And as we were working on the outline, I realized it just was not going to work for me. I just was not comfortable. So we both agreed that we would kind of table that, and she would find another writer who understood that genre and who was comfortable with that genre. So my first bit of advice is to know your boundaries, know your limits, and stand up for yourself and stick to them. Yes, you are writing for somebody else, but you are still the one doing the writing, and your comfort matters. And your mindset matters. I know personally, I can't do a dark romance because it just emotionally doesn't work for me. I wrote a dark romance once, and I was like, cool, never have to do that again. So know your boundaries, know your limits. Don't be afraid to set those and reinforce them. If you lose a client because of it, then so be it. Don't sacrifice your own comfort for somebody else. In general, not just in writing, but in general, that's good advice. One of the things that drove me insane when I was ghostwriting is inevitably people ask what I'm writing, and I would say I ghostwrite romance novels. They would ask me what that is. I would explain it, and 9 times out of 10, their reaction was, wait, so you write for somebody else, but their name gets put on it? That sucks. That doesn't seem fair. Why are you doing that? And then I have to inevitably explain, it's not my idea. It is not my characters. I don't have a problem with it. If I had a problem with it, I wouldn't be ghostwriting. So if you are not comfortable with that aspect of it, if you are not comfortable writing and having somebody put their name on it, then ghostwriting is not going to be for you, and that's totally fine. But for me, I was able to compartmentalize and sort of detach from the story because it wasn't my story. I was just telling somebody else's story for them. And yeah, some people can see that as, you know, if you're doing a pros and cons list, on the con side, your name is not attached to it. You kind of are at the mercy of what the client wants. And it can be repetitive if you're working with the same client and you kind of are working in the same genre, because the genres have their own formula and they have their own tropes. So that can get repetitive after a time. But the pros of ghostwriting are numerous. For one, it was great practice. I learned that I can write so much in such a short period of time. And when I'm really motivated and there are deadlines, I can write at least like 2 to 3 books a year, maybe. So that was a fantastic thing to learn through the ghostwriting process. I know I said it can be a con that you're at the mercy of the clients, but it can also be a pro that they supply the idea and you don't have to think of the idea. You don't have to be like, okay, so what is this story going to be? Because the client most likely will be like, this is what the story's going to be. And you're like, cool, I'll write that then. One of the things I loved the most about ghostwriting, particularly with my client, I love my client. She's fantastic. And we worked so well together. And I learned so much over the last 4 years because she actually gave me really in-depth constructive feedback, which I hadn't had in years, if not ever. And she was always really good at pairing feedback with praise. And I actually learned my strengths in writing through her telling me what they were, because I have stuff that comes easy to me, or I'm like, yeah, I think this is more of my strength because when I write it, it just flows better. But it was really nice to hear that from someone. So for example, she was like, I love your banter. I love, love, love when they have banter together. Please, whatever you can fit in banter, please do it. And I was like, yes, I love writing banter. As some of you know who have read my stuff, sarcasm is so fun for me, especially when you have 2 people who are attracted to each other but are just like strong personalities. There's going to be banter, and it's my favorite thing to write. So I really loved that she enjoyed that and leaned into that. She actually said once, when I can't remember which story we were working on, but she said, you're so good with comedy and and joking and banter. So I really want to lean into your strengths and have more of that. And I was like, cool, awesome. I can do that. On the flip side, she gave me really great feedback about, steamy romance scenes and the difference between romance and erotica. Because I write fan fiction, and fan fiction is mostly erotica. So when I was writing love scenes for romance, she was like, we need to change this so it's more romance and less erotica. And that's when I learned the difference between the two, which is romance is more focused on the feelings during the love scene and what the characters are internally going through, whereas erotica is more like the actual, acts themselves. I did not know that before. So that was a fantastic thing to learn and kind of get in my head, and definitely made me a stronger writer and made me think about those scenes and how I wanted them to play out and how I wanted them to come across. It was also great to have somebody bounce ideas off of. You start with an outline, or at least I did, and we worked on the outline together, but inevitably you're going to come to a point where you're like, oh, maybe this scene is needed here, or maybe we should move this earlier or later. And it was always great to just bounce ideas off her and be like, what if we did this instead? And a lot of times her response was, as long as it made a better story, she was cool with it. But it was really nice to know I always had that person to bounce ideas off of. And it's also a fantastic motivator. You have to finish it because you have someone waiting for this story. And we had a lot of soft deadlines. That was one of the things I really appreciated, because I am a stay-at-home mom, and for a good portion of the last few years, I was trying to homeschool my son. And so I was at the mercy of what his situation was that day. But I didn't have to stress meeting a deadline or finishing the story, because I knew she was understanding that I'm a person and not a machine. One of the things she always said, anytime I was like, this is going on, I'm sorry, she was always like, your health is more important. Your health is more important. Don't worry about it. And that just motivated me more to work on her stuff, because I was like, she's so nice. She's so understanding. I got to get this done for her. But the main thing that I really loved about ghostwriting, that I consider a pro, is that I could write it and then move on and not have to worry about it. I didn't have to worry about the editing process, really. I didn't have to worry about finding cover art or, how I was going to distribute it. I literally got paid, wrote the story, moved on to the next. That was really great for me. A final thing I would say about ghostwriting that was surprising to me, and I didn't realize would be helpful, is that my writing fan fiction helped me get the ghostwriting job. Because in fan fiction, you are taking somebody else's world and characters and you are writing for them. You're like halfway there to ghostwriting. There are a lot of overlaps with that. So if anybody gives you crap about writing fan fiction and tells you that you should write your own stuff and blah, 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 whatever else they say, ghostwriting worked for me because I had so many years experience writing fan fiction. So those skills do translate to other writing jobs, despite what people say. All in all, it was a wonderful experience. I am gonna miss it, but I've got a lot of things coming down the pipeline that require my focus, and I can't wait to get started and to share with you guys what I have cooking. Yeah, so this has been another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. I am always accepting questions or topics you would like me to cover. You can find me on all social media, which will be in the description. I also offer author coaching services, which will also be linked in this description. And can't wait to talk to you guys again. Happy writing. Bye.